the San Diego Community Power Risk and Finance Subcommittee meeting for June 15th, 2021. Let the clerk note the mayor and Mr. Humor are here. Roll call is good. Any public comment, Kimberly, for items not on the agenda? Shaking her head, no. Anything to add, withdraw, or reorder on the agenda?
Just withdraw the comments I made linking the marijuana and swimming industry and the swimming pools. Just eliminate that, please.
So noted.
Maura, if you want, I could add a quick update on our status with county discussions. We don't have a staff report or anything to share with you, but wanted to give you a 30-second update if that works for you, wherever you'd like it on the agenda.
Why don't we take that as item number 9, Cody?
Perfect.
And with that, we'll go to item 5, which is treasurer's report.
Yeah, hi, everybody. So I don't know if we have an attachment here, but just a couple of the highlights of the actual numbers through our most recent closed period ending April 30th. So we have revenue and expense figures for those for that period. And our revenues are a whopping 1.2 million to this point, a little above expectations. Our cost of energy, which I'll explain in a minute why it's so much larger than revenue, is about 10.1 million. So we're operating at a loss. The real reason for that energy cost being so large compared to the revenue is we have had to purchase a lot of RA obligations beginning with the calendar year, even before our revenue picked up. So that was just a required purchase, and that'll smooth out a little bit through the rest of the year. But we're still operating at a loss, and we're planning on having a loss for the rest of the year. The total loss through April is $1.4 million, and we're projecting a 13.5 loss. So maybe that's a win. And again, so the next couple months we'll have our increase of revenues from our phase 2 customers. So when we close out the year, the numbers will be a little bit different, and I'll present those again at that time. And that's all. I don't think we had any material to present other than that.
Any comments or questions for our treasurer?
Well, no, thanks. I'm just going to throw it out there that I guess whatever happened I'm just assuming that, and I'm not sure if this is a place for that discussion, whatever happened in the Inland Empire with the CCA or CCC there, that we're taking all the precautions that never happens with us. I mean, I'm just in terms of big picture, sort of strategic sort of thinking and planning, right? In terms of the future.
Yeah, I could chime in on that too. I think that's something that's been top of mind for us, and we've been having a lot of discussions and engagement and meetings with other CCAs across the state and trying to understand their forensics. And I can assure you, and we could talk more about this next board meeting, that we are not making any of the mistakes that they've made and have not following in their footsteps in any way.
And one of the items that came out with that was they didn't have much in the way of financial reporting concurrently, at least. So there were some comments in their press release, or maybe it was an internal release, that 6 months after the fact that they noticed they had big losses during certain months. So one thing that we're obviously doing that's different is we're keeping an eye on those numbers, and we're reporting those really in real time. So the numbers I just gave was for April 30th. That's after we have an official accounting close, but we're doing reconciliations every day and keeping an eye on those numbers. So, we're not going to get caught blindsided, that's for sure. We're going to see these things at a much more, sooner time period.
Well, that's good. I think, Greg probably remembers this, but I think that the meltdown in the county of San Diego and other counties, I know it was Orange County, and then even issues with Chula Vista, back in the 90s and then 2000s, helped it was bad for them, but helped all of us look at all those, best practices you need to avoid. And I think the same thing, that, it's good even to articulate that. Here are the lessons learned from that, and here's what we're doing to avoid those or minimize that risk or something. It's just good to have that done,
Yeah, we've been compiling a lot of data through CalCCA, who's our trade organization, has been asking for data to ensure that none of the CCAs across the state are following in those same footsteps. And we're happy to share whatever the board would like to see on that, if that's something you'd like to see more detail on. But we have a lot of that information pulled together and have submitted some of it.
Yeah, I think it's just good from a public like public information, you know, in the same way, like we saw that, and here's, you know, why we understand these mistakes were made, and just being open about it, I think is good in that way. So yeah, that's all. I mean, all right.
The other thing I've observed on that and heard on that is they're structurally different than what we are, and they didn't have full-time staff. So the staff, it was kind of like the Solana Beach setup in the first CEA, because their city manager was also functioning as the CEO of the CCA. So we're set up structurally different than that, so that, you know, they were not as vested, I think, potentially in the success of the entity.
Yeah, there was a series, and for those that are listening that may not be clear what we're talking about, this is Western Community Energy, who has filed for bankruptcy. It's in the Western Riverside area. And yeah, they had a series of issues that, what we can tell so far, they weren't fully hedged in their power procurement for the summer. They were relying on consultants and not full-time staff, and maybe some other issues as well. And we, as you know, and you see on our screen, where we have a deep bench of talent that's growing here and bringing those on board, including Byron, who's maybe in the public meeting here, but you know, to expertise in-house to focus on procuring power and making sure that our portfolios are avoiding as much risk as we can. Yeah, I think we're just on a very different trajectory, and we're at a different time than they launched as well. They launched right in the middle of COVID.
Okay.
Very good, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6, which is the FY22 budget.
Yes, thank you, Chair. More, next slide, please, Kimberly. So as an outcome from our last board meeting where we made the proposal for this budget, Director Berber asked for more detail. Next slide, Kimberly. So in an effort to address that and to provide more detail, we put together a supplemental. Director Mora, the rest of the panel, you'll see a copy of the detailed PDF file in your email when you get to it. I wouldn't expect that you've had an opportunity to review it, but this presentation shows where we've broken out a lot of the expenses that rolled up into the summary that was presented to the board. And in the full-blown supplemental package, you'll see the detailed narrative to support these numbers. No significant changes. Actually, there weren't any changes in the overall amounts. They all foot to the proposed budget that was presented to the board. Next slide, Kimberly. And these slides should look familiar to you. These were the slides that were presented in the proposal. Thought it would be a good idea just to represent those alongside with the detail and the narrative to support it. Next slide. So again, the pie chart that breaks it down. You can continue, Kimberly. So these, the bar chart shows a comparative analysis between the amended fiscal year 21 budget and the fiscal year 22 budget, just for the sake of analysis that's being presented here. Next slide. Same here with the change in net position. No change there. We're still budgeting for a $17.7 million net position at the end of fiscal year 22. Next slide, Kimberly. I'll pause here for any questions or comments on the proposed budget detail.
I think this is good. I always like the comparative. I do that with our nonprofit. We always have, you know, maybe even 2 or 3 years where we sort of compare stuff, so it's helpful. And I sympathize you as an ED of a nonprofit, having had board members say they want less information, and then you do that, and then they tell you they want more. So anyway.
Understood. Thank you, Meredith Dedina. Next slide, Kimberly. Oh, I'm sorry. Any other questions or comments on the budget?
It looks like we have a hand raised from the public. Are we able to accommodate public comment? Is there anything that we have to do to promote that person? or can they speak?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Is that Matt?
Hi. Yep, it's me. Thank you, Director.
Sure. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Directors. This is Matthew Vasilakis, Co-Director of Policy at Climate Action Campaign.
Welcome back, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. We are dialing in today to encourage the committee to allocate some modest funding for a local development business plan for fiscal year 2022. Local development business plan modeled after East Bay Clean Energy's plan can provide SDCP and the community a roadmap for creating truly local, equitable, and sustainable clean energy systems within our own borders, our communities. We are encouraged by SDCP's recent PPAs. It's something definitely to celebrate, to build more renewables with good union jobs, and we want to start to see some of that investment within our own communities as soon as possible. We can do that with a local development business plan to guide the way, and I'm happy to meet with the directors and staff to discuss this opportunity further. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 7, please.
Okay, item number 7, Chair Homura, is recommendations for the approval of our audit preparation. So we're seeking approval for the interim CEO or a designee to be able to execute 2 documents in regard to that audit preparation. The engagement letter, which would be signed by the auditor, and then we would sign secondly on that document, and then also approval for the interim CEO or designee to execute the multi-year professional services agreement that would go along with that engagement. So the idea here is to get the auditors primed and ready to go. So when we close out our 6/30 numbers, we can be as effective and as efficient as possible in terms of getting the audit report done and have it made public record once approved by the board. Next slide, Kimberly. So I'll highlight just a couple items here. The auditor that we will engage, or we're proposing to engage for the fiscal year 22 financial audit, is the auditor that also completed our fiscal year 20 audit report. They were leading up to the completion of the fiscal year 20 audit report. We did reach out to other CPA firms, and Cody and maybe Mike can speak more to that in terms of our due diligence to make sure that we sought out other auditors and landed on the auditor that we believed at the time was the best fit. Believing that still to hold true, we are proposing or seeking approval to engage Pacenti and Brinker again. The terms of the professional services agreement, basically it's a multi-year agreement, which includes a 1-year term with 2 options to renew the term of the audit, with the fees falling out to be approximately $21,000 per year, but not to exceed a $63,000 limit. Both of those, as I understand, are within Bill Carnahan's signing authority granted by the board. So we'll seek approval for this item to go before the board so that we get those documents executed and get the audit underway. I'll pause here for questions or comments.
Any comments or questions?
I could just chime in real quick. We already did 1 audit, as Eric mentioned, and so we'll continue this. And because this contract is within the signing limit of the CEO, it doesn't need to go to the board, but because this is a finance committee, and just want you to know that we are doing annual audits. It's more of an informational item for you all.
Appreciate that. Very, very important process. Need anything else from us, or?
Just a recommendation for board approval.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. You're good to
Thank you.
go, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8 is financial reserve policy draft.
Yes, item 8. Next slide, Kimberly. So at our last committee meeting and last board meeting, we indicated that we were in the process of developing a financial reserve policy. This policy, for the most part, is modeled after Peninsula Clean Energy. It was also vetted by our council, BBK. So these are just some highlights of that reserve policy. So essentially, the idea here is we've set a percentage of the annual gross revenues be set aside so that we're able to meet the objectives, the strategic objectives for San Diego Community Power, secure favorable terms with vendors, including being able to secure standalone investment grade, to actually secure a standalone investment grade rating. One article that was surfaced subsequent to the WCE matter, it highlighted 2 CCAs that actually did have credit ratings. So one of them was actually Peninsula Clean Energy. So we're proposing or seeking approval to recommend to the board that we set aside a 15% annual gross revenue, up to 15% of our annual gross revenue to allocate toward the reserve, aiming for a target of 90 days cash on hand. Now, in the article for the 2 credit rated CCAs, they benchmark 180 days cash on hand. And essentially that is cash that we would have in the reserve to operate for a period of 90 days. This policy would be reviewed on an annual basis and adjusted accordingly as we continue to grow, as we continue to generate revenue and continue to grow that net position. So I'll pause here for any questions or comments.
Are we at the point yet where we're close? If we approve this, will we show this in the future budget?
Yes, it would be presented in the future budget on an ongoing basis, and that would be part of the annual review to assess where we are, what percentage up to the 15% was allocated for the previous period, as well as take a look at how we would fall out for the subsequent periods in the budget.
Mayor?
Great, I can move, if we need to move to approve.
Yes.
I will second.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Very much, Eric. All right, moving along. We're on to item number 9, committee and member announcements. I understand Cody has an update on the county.
Thank you, Chair Himura. So just to provide you an update, we have continued discussions and analysis for the county's interest in joining SDCP. So if you recall at the last board meeting, we submitted a letter to the county after sharing it with the board that just detailed answers to 90% of their questions around our rates and what it looks like to join, et cetera. The one outstanding item is doing an analysis of an actual mini pro forma of what their numbers would look like should they join us. And we're not quite done with that. We have John and Kirby from Pacific Energy Advisors working on that with us. And we've been going back and forth on some questions and details. The high level summary is there's no showstoppers in there. It's looking financially feasible for the county to join us, but we'd like to do a little bit more homework. I know John and Kirby, or at least Kirby is on, both of them are on the call today if you have any questions on that. But we do plan to bring it to the board next week and share the results as much as we have and discuss some next steps. So that's our really brief discussion so far. We have some other cities that are having discussions and possibly want to submit data to us as well. So we'll continue to keep you all informed of that process.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mayor, you got anything else to add?
No, I just wanted to make sure, I guess, in terms of this discussion about the other CCCA, you guys should do what you feel, comfortable. And maybe at some point there may be, if it's a corollary to like financial planning or forecasting, or I'm not sure, is there a discussion, more structured discussion around lessons learned from this and what we're doing, but it may not serve communications purposes. If you think it's worthwhile doing, it's not, don't, whatever.
I appreciate that, and it's good to know if that's on your mind. So I'll discuss that with Bill, and we have plenty of materials and have had plenty of discussions, so we're happy to share that with the board and with the public.
I can assure you, our constituents who are, all watching us saw that article, in the UT or whatever, and thought the same thing, like, so anyway, the more we can get ahead of it and just be open and transparent about why we learned from it, or, the mistakes we don't make, like, again, that lack of professional staff, et cetera, financial reporting. I mean, that's shocking, actually, that even happened, that people that run cities let that happen. So anyway, whatever.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all very much. We will adjourn for today and see you next month.
Thanks for having
Take
us.
care.
Thanks.
Guys.
Bye now.
Bye.